English step by step. Phrasal verbs with off, step 1. Let's look at some examples. So here are some quite common phrasal verbs with off. And I've put some example sentences because often it's difficult to understand the meaning of a phrasal verb without a context. So the sentence gives you a context. Number 1, go off. The food has gone off. Now here, maybe it's tricky to understand the meaning of the phrasal verb if you don't see the subject. The subject is the food. Now in this case, it means that the food has gone bad. The food is not good to eat. In other words, the food is not fresh. It has gone bad. It has gone off. Example number 2, wear off. Again, it's tricky to work out the meaning of the phrasal verb just from looking at the individual words, wear off. But if we look at the sentence, we can see a context. The effects of the drug have worn off. That means the effects of the drug have become weaker. They have diminished. They have slowly become weaker. They have lost their strength. So this phrasal verb can be used for any kind of drug, including alcohol or caffeine in coffee, for example. The next phrasal verb is very common because people are travelling by plane. If we look at the context, in the sentence we see, the plane will take off soon. In other words, the plane will leave the ground soon. It will depart from the airport soon. So, this phrasal verb can be used for things like planes, helicopters, anything that is on the ground and can take off. It can also be used for ideas or for businesses. In other words, if a business is successful, it leaves the ground. It takes off. The next 2 examples are very common when you're talking about sports events. Number 4, for example, put off. They put off the football match. So, again, this phrasal verb is difficult to understand if you look at the individual words, put and off. So you have to look at the context. Now, in this context, we have to understand that the football match will not happen because it will happen later. Maybe if it's raining, then the football match will be put off. Or if there's any accident, for example, then the football match will happen later. So they put off the football match until a later time. So this phrasal verb can be used for any event which is stopped and then it will happen later at a later time. For example, a meeting. You can put off a meeting, or a visit to the dentist. You can put off a visit. The next one is a similar idea, call off. Now, call off doesn't mean do it later. Call off means don't do it. It means cancel. Look at the context. They called off the football match. That means they cancelled the football match. Or they called off, for example, the wedding. In other words, they cancelled the wedding. So if anything is cancelled, it can be called off. So this is different from put off, which means it is not cancelled, it will happen later. Called off means it won't happen later. Number 6, take off. Now this is an example of a phrasal verb with more than one meaning, because we also have take off in number 3. So 3 and 4 are take off. Now the difference is number 3 doesn't have an object, so the plane will take off. Number 6 has an object. The object is her glasses. She took off her glasses. Now this is a common phrasal verb, and I think it's easy to guess the meaning from the individual words. If you take and you remove something from its position, then you take it off, or you take them off. In this sentence we have a context. She took off her glasses. Of course, you can also use another object. she took off her shoes, or she took off her coat, etc. The next example, number 7, is also very common. Turn off. And we can see in the context of the sentence, it's they turned off the lights and went to bed. So this is an example of a phrasal verb that you can use instead of another phrasal verb like switched off. Instead of they turned off the lights, you can say they switched off the lights, or they put off the lights, and the meaning is the same. And the opposite would be they turned on the lights, or they switched on the lights, or they put on the lights. The next one, number 8, tell off, is another phrasal verb which is difficult to understand if you just look at the individual words. Tell off. But if we look at the context, we can see the parents told off the children. Now, a bigger context would allow us to understand that this means that the children did something bad and the parents told them that they shouldn't do this. So, if the parents tell off the children, that means that they are telling the children that what they did was bad. So, this is often used in the context of parents and children. It can also be used for example, a boss and a worker. If the boss tells of a worker, then the worker has done something bad or has done something that the boss doesn't like. Number 9 is another phrasal verb which is difficult to understand just from looking at the individual words. Let off. But if we look at the context, the police let off the speeding drivers. Now, in this context, we can maybe understand that the police didn't fine the speeding drivers. The police allowed the speeding drivers to go free with no punishment. So we can understand the police stopped the speeding drivers but said, probably this is the first time, so we are not going to punish you, we let you off. So this phrasal verb can also be used for parents and children, for example. If the children do something bad, then maybe the parents say, well, this time we won't punish you, we will let you off. The next one, number 10, give off, is another phrasal verb which we have to understand from its context. For example, here, the subject is the flowers. The flowers gave off a lovely fragrance. That means that the fragrance came out of the flowers. In other words, the flowers emitted a lovely fragrance. We could also say radiated a lovely fragrance. This phrasal verb is often used for smells. It can also be used for any kind of energy or radiation. Let's just take a moment to look at the structure of number 4 to 10. Numbers 4 to 10. Number 4, they put off the football match. You can also say put the football match off. Number 5, call off the football match. They called the football match off. And again, 6, 7, 8 and 9 are the same. Took her glasses off. Turned the lights off. Told the children off. Let the drivers off. Now these are examples of separable phrasal verbs. Now, number 10 is different. You can't say gave a lovely fragrance off. Now, if you want more detail about that, I'm going to talk about that later and refer to another video which explains what is happening here. So I've talked a bit about the meanings of these phrasal verbs. So now, if you'd like to practice, you can pause the video and just test yourself on the meanings. Now, I've put here at the bottom the meanings in these little blue boxes. For example, postpone, remove, reprimand, become weaker. And you can match these meanings with the phrasal verbs. Of course, often phrasal verbs have more than one meaning, or sometimes it's difficult to find other words which have exactly the same meaning, but these words are useful to help you to think about the meaning and do a little matching exercise to test yourself. So you can pause the video now and test yourself. Match the meanings with the phrasal verbs. Okay, so let's start again and check our understanding. Number 1, go off. The food has gone off. Well, in this case, we have to understand that we can't eat the food because it has turned bad. We can use this phrasal verb to talk about meat, for example, or cheese or fish, any kind of food which you can't eat because it has turned bad. Number 2, wear off. The effects of the drug have worn off. Now, here we could also say the effects have become weaker. Or diminished is another word. The effects of the drug, for example, maybe the paracetamol. The effects of the paracetamol have worn off. Or it could be a drug in a foodstuff like caffeine. The effects of the caffeine have worn off. Or the effects of the alcohol have worn off. In other words, over time they have become weaker. Number 3, the plane will take off soon. Well, leave the ground would be another way to say this. The plane will take off. This phrasal verb can also be used for anything which becomes successful. For example, a business can take off. Number 4, they put off the football match. Now this means that the football match will happen later because they have to postpone it. So in this case, we have to use this word postpone. They postponed the football match. Number 5, call off. They called off the football match. That means the football match will not happen, so it was cancelled. They cancelled the football match. Number 6, she took off her glasses. So in this case, we could use the word remove. She removed her glasses. Another example, she removed her shoes. She took off her shoes. Number 7, they turned off the lights and went to bed. Well, in this case, it's difficult to find another word or a word which means exactly the same thing. We have to use a word like this, which sounds a little bit scientific and academic, to deactivate. They turned off the lights and went to bed. They deactivated the lights. Well, you wouldn't use that word in a normal conversation. So, many phrasal verbs are useful because you can't find other words. Number 8, the parents told off the children. Again, you would have to use another word which isn't used very often in normal conversation, a word like reprimand. The parents reprimanded the children. Well, in a normal conversation you would just say the parents told off the children. Number 9, the police let off the speeding drivers. So, in this case, the police didn't punish the speeding drivers. It has the same idea, but let off is the best way to express this idea. Number 10, the flowers gave off a lovely fragrance. Well, again, emit is a possible word, but it sounds a little bit academic or a little bit like a word that a scientist would use. In a normal conversation, you would say, the flowers gave off a lovely fragrance. You can also use this phrasal verb for food. For example, the soup gave off a lovely smell. Anything like that. Now at this point you might want to check your understanding of the form of phrasal verbs, how to use them in sentences. Now you can do that by watching another video I've made called What is a Phrasal Verb? You can find the link to this video in the screen above, or you can look in the details below. Now the main points here are 6 different points, and they are mainly about phrasal verbs with objects and phrasal verbs that you can separate. So make sure you check out that video in order to understand these details about the form. So let's go back to these 10 examples. Now, number 1, go off, doesn't have an object, so this is an example of an intransitive phrasal verb. And the next 2 are the same. There is no object. The effects of the drug have worn off. Next one, the plane will take off soon. There is no object. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are all examples of phrasal verbs with objects. Number 4, the object is the football match. Also number 5, the football match. Number 6 is her glasses. Let's put that in the same colour. Number 7 is the lights. Number 8, the children. These are all the objects. So that means these are examples of transitive phrasal verbs. All of these, from 4 to 6. And also, number 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9 are all phrasal verbs which you can separate. Phrasal verbs that you can separate are sometimes called separable phrasal verbs. In other words, the two parts of the verb can be separated and you can put the object in the middle. For example, you can say put off the football match or put the football match off. Called off the football match or called the football match off. Took off her glasses, took her glasses off. These are all examples of separable phrasal verbs. Now, you can watch the other video to understand why they are separable. Now, number 10 is not separable. You can say the flowers gave off a lovely fragrance, but you can't say the flowers gave a lovely fragrance off, because this is an example of an inseparable phrasal verb. Basically, it's because the word off is a preposition, but you can understand that better if you look at the examples on the video I made about the form of phrasal verbs. So this brings us to the end of this Step 1 video on phrasal verbs with off. You can move on to the Step 2 video in which you'll find a practice exercise. Now, if you'd like to see more videos like this, please click like and subscribe, and you can always request a lesson in the comments below.